Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hi again, everybody. This is Greg, Mike, and David with the Near Memo, talking about search, social, and commerce with a local inflection through a local lens. And we are at episode 101, remarkably. I don't know what the percentage of podcasts that get beyond 10 episodes is, but we're in the 1%,
the far end
or
of
the
the bell
5%.
curve.
Yes, exactly. So, and we're excited to be back with you, and we're going to be talking about what else, Bing GPT and Microsoft's transformation, and Walmart also by analogy. And then we're also going to be talking about a survey of retailers and their spend allocation, which was very interesting, showing a kind of a return to search, if you will. So I'm going to lead off today with the Bing material AI. I mean, it's just amazing how this story continues to evolve and how captivated people, including me, are by it. And there's a couple of things that happened this week. I mean, we're now, there was the, it's like whatever the hype cycle curve, the Gartner, whoever came up with that. It's like, this is so compressed. People, ChatGPT was released, everybody tried it and was going off about it. Then Bing announced the Bing GPT version. People are going crazy, and now there's a backlash, right? So we have many articles now that are talking about how Bing has become unhinged, those that have access, all kinds of crazy stuff coming out of it when you try and provoke it or push it to its limits. And
what did Mae West say? I think any publicity is good publicity in this situation. I think it's probably true.
At this phase of the hype cycle, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that you're gonna talk about, Mike, is the sort of PR coup that Microsoft has pulled off here. But before we get into that, there's sort of four kind of connected pieces of information. One is Yusuf Mehdi has been giving updates about who's on the wait list. And apparently now they went from 1 million people in 48 hours now to, quote, millions of people on the waiting list. So this is an enormous deal, that there's so many people lined up anticipating getting access to this. The sort of publicity is unbelievable. So there's that. And then Mehdi also said 71% of the early beta testers have had a positive reaction, which seems to be credible. I think they're being fairly transparent about it. I've seen a bunch of people who have gotten in and are using it say positive things about it. Brody Clark, in particular, he's shown some screenshots of the local stuff, which I think is kind of ugly looking aesthetically, but he's positive about it generally. So there's that. But in addition to sort of now this backlash thread that's going on. And then there are two other pieces of information which are relevant to this discussion. One was a poll by Marcus Brownlee, who's a YouTube product review guy, and it had 300,000 responses, I think. And the question is, would you rather use Google as it exists now, today, without any AI augmentation, or Bing with ChatGPT added? And 59% said Google, and 41% said the Bing GPT, basically. And if you think about what the current market share of search engines is, it depends on the market you're looking at. If you look at it globally, I think Bing has less than a 3% share, slightly larger in the US, but it's like 90+% for Google versus this sort of tiny little sliver for Bing. So this, you could say, well, people prefer Google today to the AI enhanced version of Bing, but it's a really giant coup to think that 41% are really that interested in Bing. If even a small percentage of that number were to transfer over to Bing usage on a regular basis, it would be a big deal. And Matt McGee, our friend and former colleague or current colleague, depending on how you define things, also did a poll which was asking people, how much share do you think Bing GPT is going to steal from Google next year? And about 60%, as I recall, I'm not looking at it, said 0 to 5 points. there was a meaningful chunk that thought it was going to be a 20% share, but the biggest group was 0 to 5 points. But even if it's just a couple of points, it's pretty meaningful. It's meaningful to Bing, and it's really meaningful to Google. And the market will not be happy if that actually transpires for Google.
A Bing representative said it was $2 billion per point of market share, not $1 billion that we talked about last week. So it's twice as high.
I think that was Amy Hood.
And the victories for Bing go beyond just search, right? I mean, you have to download Edge. You have to download the app. There's other victories. You're getting people to look at Bing again, which people haven't, people are habitual in their search behavior. And so breaking that habit cycle is significant. Joanna Stern endorsed Edge as her favorite browser last week. She's a tech writer for the Wall Street Journal, who is very popular. So the victories for Bing in this go way beyond search market share into mind share and breaking habits and being on even with the negative stuff about the sort of unhinged AI, as we've talked about. I mean, even that is at least keeping people focused on Bing. And the question it raises, though, which I think you raised, is when does it move into legal liability territory, that sort of unhinged stuff. So.
Well, that's an interesting sort of separate discussion about whether Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act would equally protect content that was generated by a chatbot in a search engine or anywhere really, versus what currently exists, which is this is all third-party content, and the platform is not held legally responsible for whatever that content is, and that has been the thing that has been very, very controversial, and we're probably going to see some sort of modification of that. There's the Gonzalez versus Google case pending before the Supreme Court, which is about, does the algorithm itself impart liability to the platform because it's recommending content that may be, problematic or illegal or whatever it is. But back to your point, Mike, I think this is the significant thing in my mind that you said is the breaking habitual behaviors, because I think a lot of Google usage today is habitual. People are just comfortable with it, accustomed to it, and the quality of results is not dramatically different, I don't think, between Bing and Google. I mean, there are people that would argue perhaps that it is, but it's not sufficiently different to justify that market share gap. And I think getting people out into other, out of the house, so to speak, and trying other things will result in some, I'm seeing it in my, Darren Shaw from Whitespark was saying he started using Bing exclusively and doesn't notice degradation in search quality or search results. He seems to be quite happy with it. I've been using ChatGPT and Perplexity AI for a project I was working on, and that I think has resulted in me using Google like 30 or 40% less than I would have ordinarily in this situation. And it's absolutely fine. And, I can do things in ChatGPT like, here's a list of companies, tell me who owns all these companies, or give me a list of products associated with these companies. And the kind of acceleration of the research. I mean, there's always the problem of errors or inaccuracy or hallucination, but the acceleration in the research that comes from that is amazing, because I don't have to spend an hour clicking back and forth in Google results or looking at different pages, here and there to try and piece together that answer. I can get it, and then I can fact check it or whatever.
The other side of that has been well played by Microsoft is positioning Google as the evil empire, first through the antitrust work that they're often behind the scenes on or in the front of the scenes, but also I think they're leveraging that. They experience the evil empire effect where somehow public relations just totally turns against them. And I think the tide is turning, and it's turning against Google. It's an often sort of irrational response manipulated at the back end by PR and large corporations, but it's real in the sense that if people perceive it, it's real. So, and Google has been slowly sliding down the evil empire, or climbing the evil empire mountain, whichever way you want to look at it, right?
I want to highlight Kevin Roos's article, which I think came out Thursday night in the New York Times. So he had a 2-hour conversation with Bing GPT, which codename is Sydney. I would say Microsoft should have just branded this as Sydney and done away with Bing entirely. It's a much better sort of fresh start for them. But so he had a 2-hour conversation with Sydney, and I found it, and they published the whole transcript. I found it to be absolutely terrifying, and I think Microsoft may quickly reclaim its position at the top of the evil empire mountain based on some of the things the AI was saying, and frankly, like its near sentience in some cases, I thought was pretty remarkable and scary. And importantly, so Kevin Roos said in a sort of companion piece that he had been incredibly skeptical of the claims of, I don't know who the person was at Google, but it's one of the Googlers who was working on their Lambda product last year, saying that product had attained sentience, and he had been incredibly skeptical at the time. And now, after having this experience with Bing GPT, that he believes that may have been true, and he certainly feels like it's close to being true with Bing GPT. Well, so I think this is certainly, as we were talking in the green room, it's certainly not the fad that many marketers in the CallRail survey predicted it was a few months ago. I think it is a profound shift in human AI interaction, and I am very concerned about where this might go from a sort of society standpoint. And I fear that regardless of what happens in the Gonzalez case, that our institutions are just going to be so far behind the curve with the application of this technology. So
yeah, it's true. I mean, there was a piece that I saw. I don't remember the publication, that I think I linked to it in one of the last newsletters, where, I mean, people have been flying, the military has been flying unmanned drones, right, that they control remotely. And they successfully flew a fighter jet using AI. Now, I don't know what that means in practice, but you can quickly see, the Terminator scenarios coming into view, right, between Boston Dynamics with their robot guns mounted on robot dogs, the AI fighter jets, and we're into some really scary scenarios. And I agree with you, the institutions of society are ill-equipped to address these things. Now, the Europeans are talking right now about regulating AI, and they've got some legislation, I think, working its way through the process. So they will be first to market with some set of regulations, which may or may not be sufficient. But the ethical concerns, I mean, we're as marketers, we're all talking about it on the tool level. It saves me time in the spreadsheets. It helps me generate title tags or, whatever.
Review responses.
Right. And the review response discussion is really interesting for another time. We talked a little bit about it with fake reviews. But anyway, I think that, Mike, you want to sort of finish up your talking points with the Walmart discussion as well. I mean, I think what Microsoft has successfully done is it's rebranded itself as a much more ethical company. Satya Nadella has a lot to do with that versus Steve Ballmer as the personification of the company. And their position as an underdog vis-a-vis Google, which is a complete turnaround from where Google was a few years ago, I think has also made people open to downloading the Edge browser. They can take chances and they can emphasize things that the market leader can't. They can put an emphasis on privacy in a way that Google maybe can't equally. And so it's been a profound shift. And so they're well positioned to pick up some kind of, browser share, search share, whatever. But
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.